While they were singing and we were given, I just felt moved that I think we just need to take a second to pray. Would you pray with me? Holy and gracious God, as your church, as your family, as your people, your children, we come before you. But we don't get it right. I know I don't get it right. Father, there's so many times that I think this is about me, and I forget it's all about you. Father, forgive us for when we stumble, for when we lose focus. Father, forgive us when we think we're smarter than you, we're wiser than you. Open our ears and our eyes this morning so that we might hear you. We pray this in your Son's holy name. Amen. Let's take a look at this.
Let me put it this way. I'd like to think that God is real, for one reason or the other.
I don't believe in God because the idea that an omniscient, loving being would judge me, who is mortal and ignorant and tiny, for all eternity based on a few years' experience, I find to be rather a cruel thought.
Look at everything around us, from the universe to our being to the ability to have consciousness. I think that it can only be explained by God.
All the power that God has, he, she, it has given to me. So we're definitely one.
I hope there's something else out there. It'd be fun to experience whatever God has in store next. Either that or we're all just evolved apes.
There's so many things where it's just like that couldn't have just happened. Like that has to have something behind it, and I believe that something's God. For all we know, there could be aliens out there. I have no idea, to be honest.
I was raised atheist. I don't believe in a higher power. But, I also don't claim to know everything about the world. And I think maybe it's a bit arrogant for people to try and believe they know the truth to anything.
For me, yes. Yes, it's obvious. There are so many things. For me personally, so many things that I've been through, and after that I'm like, well, that had to be God.
The pat answer is that how can there be no God when there's all this beauty around us? But I think about evolution and science and all of that kind of thing and think, how can you not just accept it the way it is?
I really don't know what to believe, to be quite honest, so it's kind of just really just living it day by day and just trying to be a really good person.
I don't know. I don't know if there is one. I just pretend, I guess, and hope that there's something else out there.
Welcome to the conversation, church. The big question of the day is there God? Is there a God? Ultimately, you're going to find out that it is a question not of rationality, but of faith. Because right now, it's going to take faith to find a place to stand in the midst of this question. So I want to ask you all, and I want you to share, because this is not just Pastor Mike talking. This is y'all in a conversation with each other. I want to ask you this question. What was or is the biggest hurdle in your believing God is real? What was, or maybe still is, the biggest hurdle that you've had to encounter in your believing that God was real? And here's what some people have written. That God doesn't make sense, that God seemed angry or mean, I had a bad church experience, there's no solid evidence, I didn't grow up in the church. What might be your reason, or was one of your reasons, that helped you or stopped you? What was your biggest hurdle in believing that God was real? So I want you to pick one person, probably someone you didn't come with, and just spend a minute each way asking and answering that question. Are you ready? You might have to move around a little bit. This is a whole 2-minute exercise in conversation. Ready, set, go. What was or is the biggest hurdle? You should have switched. The other person should be talking by now. There are a lot of reasons why people don't believe in God today. A ton. Matter of fact, as you saw that study, that in just, was it 10 years? Oh, no, it was about 10 years. It had gone down by 10%, the number of people that believe, a little more than 10%. And I think that number continues to dip and drip. And reasons people say that they don't believe now is because we know so much more about the universe. We're just so much more well-informed. That religions, Christianity included, seem inconsistent. We don't seem to follow our own rules. We don't practice what we preach. And there doesn't seem to be any uniformity of belief if there's a God at all. The weakness of religious arguments, explanations, and apologetics. Church, that's on us. We don't do a good job in explaining what we believe. And when we get right down to it, we go, well, you just got to feel it, or you just have to believe it. And for a rational thinking individual, that's just not enough. A couple more. God doesn't seem as important as he once did. The idea of a divine, the idea of there's a God out there in the universe as a creator, that just doesn't seem like to be as big a deal. Religion used to run in families, but it doesn't much more. Matter of fact, families seem to be something that's changed over the last few years. And now we know so much more about our brain, our skull. You know, you've already heard the studies and how they've been able to create that euphoric effect of walking into the light by just triggering a certain section of people's brains. We know so much more about our brain. And then there's the slipperiness of religious and spiritual beliefs. Again, it's that idea of how the church and religions can couch everything in feelings and everything just in experience. And that's really hard to quantify. That's really hard to say, I want to stand on just that. And the world's looking at us, looking at people that believe, and they go, are those all your reasons? Is that it? What I want you to know is that as a church, this is a place that you can belong, right? We have that even on our sign outside. It says, you belong here. But with that, I want you to know that you can belong here before you believe. Before you've said yes, before you've got dipped in the water, before whatever religious activity that you think needs to happen for you to say that you believe, you can still belong here. This can be a place for you as you're trying to figure this thing out. And for some of us, it takes us our entire lifetime to figure it out. And for some of us, we walk through the doors and go, oh, Jesus, I'm home. But you can belong here before you believe here. And you all need to believe that. and you all need to practice that. So if someone comes in here and it looks like they don't fit in, they can, what's the word? Before they, super important. Because I guarantee you that you probably belonged to a group or a faith group before you ever believed. All of our little kids that are in here, that come in here, that are over in room 101, going through the orange curriculum, I wear orange to remind myself that we are an orange church, that we believe in the power of the love of family and the love of Christ, the love of family being red and the love of the church and the love of Christ being yellow. When you bring those two colors together, what do you get? Orange. That's the strategy. We believe that two influences together are more powerful than one. So we bring our family and our church family together, and we create this orange idea. And so I remind myself by wearing an orange tie. The other reason, someone asked, Mike, why are you all dressed up today? And I said, because I'm not wearing my robe at the 10:30 service. And I have to remind them that, and remind me, remind us all, that we can all belong before we. And ultimately, it's not about how we're dressed. Get my phone back on track here. So, in my life, I've had a lot of conversations. If you've ever had a conversation, this should be everybody's hands goes up. If you've ever had a conversation with someone that doesn't believe in God, raise your hand. If you ever had a conversation with someone that would say that they were an atheist, you don't have to raise your hand, but you can just nod your head. And if at some point in your life, you've had questions that your faith doesn't answer, just say, help me, Jesus. Okay. I have a lot of people in my life that are incredibly smart, very rational, engineer-minded men and women, and I would say that a good portion of them are atheists. And they ask great questions, questions that I have a hard time answering, and questions that the church has a hard time answering. And they read a lot more than I think they should. And they've explored the church a lot more than maybe we have. And so there's a writer named Greta Christian, and she asked this: if God existed, why wouldn't it just be obvious? And it is a phenomenally good question. If God existed, why wouldn't it just be obvious? Well, as we've been asking a question that's been asked for generation upon generation upon generation, I want to let you know that the psalmist says it is obvious. The psalmist cries out in Psalm 19, he says, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech, night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words, no sound is heard from them, yet their voice goes out to all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. The psalmist says, it's so obvious there's a God. You can't miss it. God made himself obvious. And yet there's still so many people that look and say, if there's a God, why didn't he make it obvious? See, now as we dig into this, I want you to understand that we may end up at a conclusion that you're not comfortable with. Because most of the time, people want me to come to church and they want me to tell you how to believe. And I want to say today, I cannot do that. And most days, I will never tell you how to believe. I will engage you and ask you to start thinking about something and maybe take a step of faith and test it out. But today, of all days, today the question is not about proof. Today the question is about faith. What do you have faith in? It's important for all of us to admit that we do not have the answer or proof to my question, but simply a belief. Even a faith. Is there a God? My answer would be, I believe there is. I have faith that there is, but I can't prove it. My friends' answer who are scientific and rationally minded, maybe atheistic, would say, I don't believe there's a God. And I have faith that the universe, however it came about, is all that there is. There's nothing out there. It becomes a question of faith. So if we're talking about faith, Let's see what a little scripture gives us here. Hebrews 11 says, and without faith it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. We must believe that he exists, a belief, and then we have to seek him. Believe and seek after him. The writer of Hebrews goes on, he says, now faith is the confidence of what is hoped for and the assurance of the things we don't see. Faith is about trusting in things that we don't know all the information to. What it is. And you are a faithful people. We are all a faithful people. We put trust in things all the time. When you sat down in your pew today, did you check it to make sure it was structurally sound? No? Did you worry when someone else sat down in the pew, go, I don't know if it can handle that much more weight? When I sat next to no, okay. No, you trusted, you had faith in it, you believed, and so you let your life live out that way. We all do that in lots of different places in our life. See, but when I look at the world, when I look at creation, when I look at everything that's out there, I think I see a lot of things that are made. I don't see a lot of things that are spontaneous. So I imagine going on an excavation, and when we went to Ireland, we got to see an excavation, and they dug down in a hole, and they got to see the works of these primitive, they were actually Vikings, folks in Ireland, and they showed us their fire pit. They also showed us a tomb. They had all their gold and their stuff like that. So you saw all this evidence of who they were, but I didn't look at that evidence of who they were and go, well, that just spontaneously happened. When I saw the necklaces and the combs and the things like that, I didn't say, well, because of the pressures in the ground, it shaped it that way. I said, it looks like someone made that. And it gets even harder because when I look at creation and everything I encounter, it seems not only to be made, but it seems to be tuned. So imagine if we were excavating, digging down, and suddenly, where we're about 3,000 years in our history, someone digs out a perfectly preserved Steinway piano. Pretty awesome, right? They dust it off, and they get it all out there, and then Jeff sits down and he plays it, and it's perfectly in tune. Impossible, right? Well, I think that's impossible. But yet, that's kind of how the universe is. Take a look at this.
So it has been amazing to be married to a physicist. One of the things that Catherine has said to me that I think is so striking is we now know, for example, that there are these cosmological constants, these ways that the universe is tuned, and it's these numbers that the physicists have to plug into their equations to get everything to work. For example, there's a constant related to gravity. How strongly do things attract each other? And you set that just a little bit differently, and the universe never gets stars, and then never gets planets, because stars form, obviously, by gravity. And the universe just quickly collapses in on itself. Or, if it's set the other way, if the dial is turned just too far the other way, it expands endlessly, and you never get the coalescing of matter that you get in the galaxies, and in stars, and then in planets, and then eventually our planet. So the fact that these things are tuned, and there's at least a dozen of these constants that have to be, the dial has to be set exactly right, or you never get life of any kind on a planet like Earth. And scientists have realized we have no idea why they're set the way they're set. I think when you start discovering those just givens of the universe, like it just is this way, it didn't have to be this way, but it is this way, it leaves you much more open to the possibility that it is this way because someone chose it to be this way.
When I look at the universe, I think the universe argues design. I think the universe argues creation, a creator. But not everybody sees that. And so when we as people of faith, we look at the world, there's different types of revelation. There's natural revelation and special revelation. And natural revelation is what we're going to talk about for a second. Special revelation are the things that we talk about from a faith standpoint. So like natural revelation. Some of y'all know that I grew up in Southern California, up in Los Angeles, and I paid my way through college by working at a fish store. Not like cutting up and selling fish. I was a fish wrangler at a pet store. So I would catch the fish. Your little kid would come to the glass window, stick his nose around it, and say, I want that goldfish out of a sea of goldfish. And I would catch it because I was that good. But not only did I do that, I started out as a junior fish wrangler and worked my way all the way up to the guy that would go out and build the aquariums in the hotels. It's pretty awesome. And so as you build these amazing aquariums, you get to encounter some of the most beautiful creatures that God ever created. And as I walked through the aquarium stores that I've worked, I always said it's like God used all of his super vibrant colors in this part of his creation. So right up there, you see yellow tangs, you see some purple anthias, just some gorgeous, you can see a blue tang or dory if you're looking for dory. And people go, oh, I've seen all those before. That's not very impressive. Well, this is called a mandarin goby. I think it looks a little psychedelic, a little trippy. I don't know what God was thinking when God decided to use those colors together on that creature, but wow. Or this guy, a clown triggerfish. Just amazing. Or this, a flame angel. Just absolutely stunning, beautiful creatures and creations that we look at and we go, why would anything be painted that color? We don't know. But we know, I think just God had hey, I got some fluorescent red left in my bucket. Let's just throw that in the ocean. But there's one creature that I look at that I marvel at more than any other creature, and that is the cuttlefish. And the cuttlefish is one of the smartest creatures on the planet, a master of disguise. He can change he can change colors all day long. He can flash like a disco ball and do all sorts of crazy things that nothing else in creation can do. And I think that nature reveals some of the design of God. That's a natural revelation. And I think when you look around and you see beautiful things, there are moments that just cause you to stop and go, wow. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Someone designed that. Because it looks like that doesn't look accidental. That looks like it's on purpose. Now, special revelation, which we're not talking about today, because if you're talking to people that are not men and women of faith, special revelation falls in those categories that don't make sense to people outside of the faith. Special revelation like, well, the Bible says. Well, that doesn't work for someone that doesn't believe or doesn't have a story of faith. Or God spoke to me. God spoke to me. God revealed to me alone. That's a special revelation. It doesn't work in this context. Or that my faith has always taught me. My faith teaches me that. That, again, that's another special revelation. So when we're talking about is there God, we have to fall back only on natural revelation. I have played with computers all my life. When I was a young man, I spent all my allowance and bought the Timex ZX80 keyboard, which was one of the first personal computers you could buy that was affordable. And so my children have watched me grow up playing with computers. Literally, as an adult, I'm still growing up. My wife will attest to that. I'm still a kid. But my kids have grown up in my lap, usually watching me edit videos or build things in computers. When my oldest son was 10, he inherited my old computer, much like dads will do. They'll pass down the junky computer, so they now have an excuse to buy a brand new computer, right? That was my plan. I did it. It worked. Thank you, Amy. When he was 16, he decided that old junky computer that was really old and junky needed to be replaced. And so we went out and we bought everything we needed to get. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit in the story. He called me just recently, and he said, Dad, I was cleaning out that computer that we built. And it was so dusty, right? You wouldn't believe the amount of dust that's in there. And dust is just human skin particles, which just will gross you out whenever you have to dust like a computer, because it's like, it just collects it. And he says, Dad, you remember that computer? I said, yeah, I remember that computer. He says, well, something happened when we were building that computer. I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, well, I remember that you cut your finger on that fan. Like, sort of. I vaguely remember. He says, no, I really remember it. Because while you were there, while I was cleaning it out, I saw the drops of blood in my computer case. I saw fingerprints that you had left inside the computer. I had left my own fingerprints inside this thing that I had helped him create. I think that God does that all the time. I think what we are looking for is evidence of God's fingerprints in creation. We're looking for the things that point us to say, hey, there's evidence here that points to something else. My conclusion of that evidence may be different than yours, but there's evidence that points to something else. See, when we look at our world, there's complexity in design, and I think complexity in design points us to a complex designer. When we look at our world, when we look at people, when we look at just everything we can find around us, there's order and tuning to it. And if the world is tuned, I believe that points us to a tuner. And there are moments where a piece of music will cause you great pause and move you emotionally. There are moments where beauty will just cause you to pause and just fall into awe. Matter of fact, when they launched the Hubble telescope, you all remember the Hubble telescope, what once was the best telescope in the whole wide world? When they launched it, when those first images came through, they came through blurry. And they were like, oh no, it doesn't work. Imagine that. You worked on the Hubble and it didn't work. And then they figured out what they had to do to fix it. And so they fixed it. And then when those first images came through, the people in mission control just went, because it was beautiful. It was beautiful beyond their imagination. I think that beauty and art points us to something that is beyond ourselves. And then there's this simple thing. The reason we don't kill each other on the spot, the reason we don't eat our children, the reason we choose to love, it's that morality points us to a rightness outside of ourselves. There's got to be something outside of ourselves. See, for me, all of those are enough to point me to a designer. They point me to a creator. They point me to a tuner. They point me to an artist. They point me to someone that is righteous, beyond my righteousness. I wrote this so I wouldn't forget it. To experience a universe of mathematical order instead of infinite chaos, to encounter the beauty of the heavens, to believe that everything in all existence spontaneously started from nothing without a starter, also requires faith. So my friends who are on the other side of this question, is there a God? To believe that everything happens and is happening without something or some reason, I believe also requires faith. But for me, it requires more faith than I have. I can't believe that everything starts from nothing. Can't. I just don't have that ability. It requires too much faith. The complexity, the tuning, the beauty, the morality, all point us to something other than ourselves. If you are even remotely with me, say I am. And I say that something is God. Because ultimately, this is not a question of can I prove it. It's a question of can I point to the fingerprints? Can I see the Maker's mark? Can I see the marks of the Maker on you? in your life? Can I see the marks of the Maker on this planet? Can I see the marks of the Maker in our universe? And I can. My job is to help other people and to enter into conversations and to not to shoot people down, to listen to where they are, to understand that they don't see it that way yet. And so I walk with them. I talk with them. I share with them. I enter into relationship and deep conversation with them. And I don't have all the answers, and neither do you. And guess what? I love this part. Neither do they. And when we start getting honest about saying, this is ultimately a question of faith, then the conversation becomes so much different, so better, so much more different. And say, listen, you just have faith that it all started randomly. I say it started with a purpose. Let's talk about that. You guys pray with me and pray for our friends and pray for our world as we answer this question together.